Ryan Reynolds here for, I guess, my 100th Mint commercial. No. I mean, honestly, when I started this, I thought I only have to do like 4 of these. I mean, it's unlimited premium wireless for $15 a month. How are there still people paying 2 or 3 times that much? I'm sorry, I shouldn't be victim blaming here. Give it a try at mintmobile.com/save. Whenever you're ready.
$45 upfront payment equivalent to $15 per month. New customers on first 3-month plan only. Taxes and fees extra. Speed slower above 40 gigabytes. See details.
Having the correct diagnosis, having the correct view on how the brain is acting helped him to better direct his efforts. That's something that I'm hoping will spread very rapidly once this information is in people's hands.
You're listening to Make Some Noise podcast, episode number 601 with guest Kyra Bobinet. Welcome to Make Some Noise podcast, your guide for strategies, tools, and insight to empower yourself. I'm your host, Andrea Owen, global speaker, entrepreneur, life coach since 2007, and author of 3 books that have been translated into 18 languages and are available in 22 countries. Each week, I'll bring you a guest or a lesson that will help you maximize unshakable confidence, master resilience, and make some noise in your life. You ready? Let's go. Hello, everyone. Welcome to another episode of the podcast. I'm so glad that you're here. You all know how much I love brain science. And if you don't know, now you know. I'm fascinated with why we behave the way that we do, why we think the way that we do, how and why these patterns are created, even though they might be patterns that we don't really like about ourselves anymore and that we're trying to change. Hence, brain science. And my guest today is talking about that and has spent, I think, the large part of her professional life studying the brain and all of those things that I just mentioned. So stay tuned for that for just a second. Speaking of change, I have one opening this spring. We're still in spring? Yes, we're still in spring, Andrea, for coaching, for private coaching with me. If you would like some support, if you would like to hear more about it and read what it is, head on over to andreaowen.com/links. That's where you'll find everything to see if it's a fit for you. Even sometimes filling out the coaching application can be helpful for you to kind of assess whether coaching is right for you or not. And I'm always going to be honest with you and tell you if I think I can help you or not. I would say 98% of the people that I get on the phone with, yes, we're a good fit, but sometimes not. I'm not going to pretend that I can help you if I know that I can't. So anything that you hear about here on the show, all the important stuff, andreaowen.com/links. Again, I've got one opening for private coaching right now. I'm excited for you to listen to today's guest. So let me just get right into it and tell you a little bit about her. Kyra Bobinet, MD, MPH, is the CEO and founder of Fresh Try, a cutting-edge neuroscience-based health behavior change platform developed with and for Walmart associates. Dr. Bobinet is an award-winning public health physician who specializes in healthcare innovation, technology-enabled behavior change, behavior neuroscience, health disparities, and population health management. Dr. Bobinet has dedicated her life to helping people free themselves from failure and, in particular, achieve lasting habit change to live happier, healthier lives. Her iterative approach to healthy habit formation and behavior change is helping individuals beat burnout, achieve sustainable health and wellness, and embody their fullest potential. So without further ado, here is Dr. Kyra. Kyra, thank you so much for being on the show. Welcome.
Thank you for having me.
I'm excited to talk to you. I feel like this interview has been a long time coming, and I found your work, I think, late last year, and just love everything you do. And I would love to start out by asking, because it's so specific what you do, and it fascinates me how people get to this place in their profession. So did you know from a young age you wanted to get into this work, or did you sort of stumble upon it? Can you kind of tell us your journey of how you got here?
You know, when I was growing up, I basically helped everybody. I helped my neighborhood kids learn how to read. I, started little businesses to help make money for them. I just was a helper. And then as I grew up and I became a scientist, and then I went to medical school, I noticed that everybody was going into specialties, and I became involved in a volunteer program for youth who were incarcerated, which was like a whole other world that I didn't know anything about. And what I noticed over and over again with my patients and also with my youth is that there was this intention to do something, but then this inability to do it, over and over again, I know what I should do. I just don't do it. It became the rally cry for me, and it drew my attention so strongly. And so I just went into behavior change research, behavior change interventions, designing interventions to change behavior. There's really no specific degree for that. So I got a D. I also got a public health degree and just kind of followed my nose because I was so passionate about this.
And that's fascinating. That interests me too, because when I got into, because my first career was actually in fashion merchandising, which feels like a lifetime ago. I don't even talk about it. And then I got into fitness. That's what my undergrad is in, which actually brought me to life coaching, because for me, I was really excited about, because I've always been sort of the consummate hype girl and cheerleader and getting people to do stuff, but it's the keeping people doing stuff that's the hard part. And that part fascinates me. That's why I love your work so much. So the new book that you have is Unstoppable Brain, the new neuroscience that frees us from failure, eases our stress, and creates lasting change. Can you tell us, because this is your second book, so what brought this one on? I'm assuming it's similar story to what brought you to the work in general.
Yeah, for me, it's this kind of nagging feeling of not being able to solve the no-do gap. I know what I should do, I just don't do it. And what I found in the first book was when I was writing the motivation chapter, I ran across like two little innocent studies, one of which showed that when you lose motivation, this area of your brain called the habenula was turned on. And then the second
so when you lose motivation, not when you have motivation.
When your motivation is killed, this is the switch. This is the kill switch for motivation.
Okay.
And then the second study, which nobody had combined these two, but the second study was all about if this part of your brain gets activated, you lose your motivation to keep trying. So it turns on with failure. That's the first part. And then the second part is it kills your motivation to keep trying. So it was almost like, Reese's peanut butter and chocolate, like those things were kind of in my mind. And then as I continued, I started my company. I was like fully into software development of behavior change software, that kind of thing, trying to get the answer to what is the secret to long-term change. And in that research, I had found this sort of miraculous mindset that only existed among people who kept their behavior. So whoever could maintain their behavior change, whether it's weight loss, reversing their disease, managing their disease, that kind of thing, or even optimizing their fitness, those people only had one thing in common, which is this iterative mindset. And putting two and two together, I realized, the iterative mindset is the key to getting around and keeping the habenula, which is this kill switch of motivation, quiet. And also iteration causes you to never fail. And so it was the most protective thing I'd ever seen in all of psychometrics, in all of psychology, in all of behavior change research that, in 30 years of looking at this.
Why? Okay. Because I've been in the kind of wellness/mindset self-growth industry for 17 years now. And I have never heard of this part of the brain.
Exactly.
Why is it just boring? Is that why no one's really talking about it?
Yeah, it's a late bloomer. So, it was discovered in the late 1800s, but then, in the last 10 years, basically, there's been literally an explosion of puzzle pieces to the puzzle. So, when I wrote my first book, those two studies were basically it. And since then, and even during COVID, an explosion of other research found that it controls this area of the brain. The habenula controls depression. It's the controller of anxiety. It's the controller of addiction. It is the controller of sleep. It is the controller of decision making. It is the controller of hunger. So, I was in the camp of people and scientists and clinicians who thought that depression came from our rumination, from our, frontal cortex, prefrontal cortex, dorsolateral prefrontal cortex specifically. And so this kind of blew my mind that, there's been like a couple studies where they do deep brain stimulation of this area of the brain to turn it off. And the person is completely asymptomatic of depression, like suicidal depression that is not treated any other way. And so we're at the advent. There's no, you're in the first to know. You're in the first people
Oh,
to
we are all very special now.
you are. You are.
Yeah.
You're bringing it to the people because no one has heard of this. At the same time, it is the most powerful behavior controller that we face. And so this is going to just be a watershed moment in medicine, in behavior change and coaching. Everything is going to turn on this information. And so, yeah, you're right. No one knows about it yet.
Okay, it's a secret that's not so secret anymore. So just so I have this correct and understand in sort of layman's terms,
Yeah.
is it correct that we don't have a whole lot of control on if the habenula is turned on or off? What we have control of is our mindset when it gets turned on?
So what turns it on is any form of perceived failure, which failure has a lot of cousins. So there's disappointment, there's frustration, there is demoralization, that kind of family of feelings. And up until now, we thought, oh, that's kind of an innocent thing to feel frustrated. But now we know if you think about this brain area, that's going to turn on this brain area and you don't want that. So there is a way to turn it off. There is a way to prevent it from coming on. And again, growth mindset, for example, it reduces the chances that this will go on because you believe that you can change, right? And just that belief protects you from a lot of failure, but it doesn't specifically address failure directly. And so this iterative mindset, to me, is the most direct cure for preventing failure and even neutralizing failure afterwards. But the main message to anybody using any mindset is failure is a fire that you got to put out immediately. You can't just let that burn because you wouldn't let a fire burn in your house, you know, and you would take it seriously. And so now that we know how powerful this area of the brain is, we can do the right thing and we can do new things that we were maybe careless with or ignorant of before.
Okay, we need to take a quick ad break, and when we come back, I want to ask you if we can kind of outline this in an example that I think is really common for my listeners. So we'll be right back. Shopify's already taken the cash register online, helping millions sell billions around the world. But did you know that Shopify can do the same thing at your retail store? Give your point of sale system a serious upgrade with Shopify. With Shopify, you get a powerhouse selling partner that effortlessly unites your in-person and online sales into one source of truth. Track every sale across your business in one place and know exactly what's in stock. Connect with customers inline and online. Shopify helps you drive store traffic with plug-and-play tools built for marketing campaigns from TikTok to Instagram and beyond. Get hardware that fits your business. Take payments by smartphone, transform your tablet into a point of sale system, or use Shopify's POS Go mobile device for a battle-tested solution. Sign up for a $1 per month trial period at shopify.com/noise, all lowercase. Go to shopify.com/noise to take your retail business to the next level today. Shopify.com/noise. I have definitely been in that place where my paycheck ran out before the next one got here. Life doesn't happen bi-weekly, so why should payday? The money you earn can be in your hands today with Earnin. Earnin is an app that gives you access to your pay as you work, up to $100 per day or up to $750 per pay period. Just download the Earnin app and verify your paycheck. Then access up to $100 a day as you work and leave an optional tip. Any money you access plus tips are automatically repaid from your next paycheck. You can use Earnin to pay for a girls' night out, a last-minute gift for a loved one, or even summer camp for the kids. Make Earnin a part of your financial routine and join Earnin's over 3.5 million customers who say things like, when I think about Earnin, I think about financial stability, security. It gives me a lot of peace of mind. Download Earnin today, spelled EARNIN, in the Google Play or Apple App Store. When you download the Earnin app, type in Noise under podcast when you sign up. It really, really helps the show. Noise under podcast. Subject to your available earnings, location, daily max, and pay period max. See earnin.com/TOS for details. Earnin is a financial technology company, not a bank. Bank products are issued by Evolve Bank and Trust, member FDIC. Fast forward to the end of 2024 and think about your goals. What can you do right now to give yourself the best chance of succeeding? If you want to learn a new language, you absolutely should get Babbel. Don't pay hundreds of dollars for private tutors or waste hours on apps that don't really help you speak the language. Babbel's quick 10-minute lessons are handcrafted by over 200 language experts to help you start speaking a new language in as little as 3 weeks. Babbel's designed by real people for real conversations. Studies from Yale, Michigan State University, and others continue to prove Babbel is better. One study found that using Babbel for 15 hours is equivalent to a full semester at college. Now it's so easy to speak simple conversation phrases with the guy that takes care of my lawn without having to consult language apps. Here's a special limited time deal for our listeners. Right now, get up to 60% off your Babbel subscription, but only for our listeners at babbel.com/noise. Get up to 60% off at babbel.com/noise, spelled BABBEL.com/noise. Rules and restrictions may apply. I would love an example, and maybe I'm incorrect in this mindset shift that I've had recently, but I think I'm pretty common, and I tell my listeners this, in that my workout, quote unquote, career, and I don't mean a literal career, I just mean like, like working out on and off my whole life. I'm consistent mostly, but I do have seasons of my life where I've fallen off the wagon for sometimes months. And when I used to work in the fitness industry, that was the only time I was truly consistent because I literally did it for a living. I had access to the gym all the time. It was part of my work. And so now, I'm older, and I just have decided to have compassion for myself and grace. And I'm like, okay, well, you know what? Maybe that's just how it works for me. And I'm okay with that. And what I have found by adopting that mindset is that I'm more forgiving and I'm quicker to get back to working out than I was previously. If I just felt bad about it and beat myself up. So can you kind of walk us through the brain science of what's happening throughout that whole process? Because I'm thinking also trying to pinpoint the failure. What I would consider the failure is just stopping for whatever reason. Like if I have an injury and then never come back, or I get sick and I never come back, or I just get busy and don't put it in my schedule. So can you kind of just walk us through that and if I'm on the right track or what that might look like?
You're spot on. So what happened is that whenever you stopped exercising, there was some failure moment that you didn't detect, because failure and the habenula are all silent and painless. There's a psychological pain that comes in, but we can't identify it yet. And so what happened was you got too busy, and then a part of you, your subconscious mind, was like, I'm failing at exercising. And then you suddenly didn't feel like exercising anymore. And this is what happens to people is they wake up the next day and they don't feel like doing the thing that's good for them or that they intended to do. And then what happens is that they blame themselves because they have no culprit to point to, so the amazing intuition and invention and creativity that you used of, well, I'm just going to give myself grace. That was your way out of that failure moment. Right. And you neutralize that failure. And then naturally the motivation comes back online because it's there all the time. It's just that we suppress it with failure. If that makes sense.
Okay. Yeah.
So this area of the brain like prevents us from touching the hot stove more than once. It protects us from life-threatening actions. Right. But when it comes to doing good things, then it's in our way.
So is the habenula essentially trying to protect us from having those feelings of failure?
No, the habenula is basically like, you will fail at this. Do not try to jump off a cliff. You have no wings. You cannot fly. Like it's the voice of reason in that sense. You will fail. It predicts failure.
Gotcha.
But as you can imagine, if you're trying to level up in your life, or you're trying to get yourself to work out more, or you're trying to eat healthy, or any of those kinds of things, this is your biggest obstacle.
So is this the inner critic?
No, it's not the same as the inner critic. So the inner critic is more like the rumination center. I would say that that's kind of like the library of content that the habenula can use based on, previous experiences, like twice burned, twice dry kind of thing. Yeah, it's the evidence that it draws from, but it can come up with its own, unique way of pre-failing, I call it, oh, that's not going to work out for me. I better not try.
Interesting. So when I did work in the fitness industry, there was this sort of mantra expression that we would say, and it went something like, lack of movement and momentum will bring on a lack of motivation. Is that the same thing?
I think so, in the sense of, if I witness myself in motion, in inertia, all those things, then I'm going to be protected from failure. But again, just like growth mindset, it doesn't directly look at the eyes of the failure monster, and so my preference would be, can we all just like identify where we think we failed and then stop blaming ourselves for losing our motivation to keep trying the good thing?
Okay. Okay. Got it. How is this a game changer, or is it for people who have chronic anxiety?
Yeah. So chronic anxiety is fear of the future. It's something that you've got somebody who's stuck in place or in inaction. Again, they lose their motivation because their habenula is trying to protect them from the big scary thing that's going to happen in the future, right around the corner, that kind of thing. So there's something called negativity bias in psychology, where, oh, that's not going to work out for me, that kind of thing. That's the voice of the habenula, that predicting pre-failing, it's not going to work out for me. I got to do something else, or I'm just stuck. That anxiety, that worry of the future is all about habenula. Yeah. And so the solution, again, is to look at and neutralize every form and thread of failure story that you're telling yourself that is fueling the anxiety.
Okay. So it sounds a little bit like, is that similar to, and this is what I do. My listeners are like, there goes Andrea trying to break things down and make sense of it. Is it sort of like CBT, cognitive behavioral therapy?
CBT can be helpful in the sense that you have an algorithm to apply to make you the thing that gets you maybe across the chasm of, I know what I should do, I just don't do it, right?
Yeah.
So many times that algorithm can save somebody because they're just following a recipe of dealing with that. Yeah. However, again, they are not dealing with the failure tendency. There's a paradox in success right now that we know about this area of the brain, that failure is twice as strong as success. Loss is twice as strong as gain. And so this is more powerful than dopamine. This is more powerful than serotonin. This is going to control everything. So what I would invite people to think about differently is what do I need to neutralize or reframe about failure or my anticipation of failure that would help me get going? And then you can certainly use CBT and those kinds of things to manage the surface, but realize that the fire is still brewing down below. Yeah.
And that's often a question I ask coaching clients when they're afraid to do something. I was like, well, let's just talk about worst case scenario. Like what would happen? Right. And they tell me, and then, like the question is like, well, how likely is that? And if it does happen, how would you recover from that? So it sounds a little bit similar to that. You mentioned dopamine and serotonin. Well, this makes me curious too. Do you think that there's a place, and I'm sure maybe research is already going there, where Big Pharma is going to try to create a drug that will target that part of the brain, the habenula?
So far there is a little evidence around ketamine. So ketamine therapy, actually, they've shown that in rat brain and in human brain more recently, that ketamine is absorbed into the habenula and stays there for about 3 months. Well, guess what? That 3-month window pretty much mirrors what you see in symptom relief of people with depression. And so we think that maybe that's a really strong clue that the reason why ketamine helps with depression and treatment-resistant depression in particular is by the habenula. It just shows the habenula.
Interesting. So I just signed on to start ketamine therapy. And as we're recording this episode will already, when it comes out, I will have already started, but I'm going to start this Sunday. So I'm excited about that.
Oh, wonderful. Yeah.
Yeah. I'm in long-term recovery. I haven't drank in 12 years. So I was very careful about making this decision to go into any kind of psychedelic therapy, but that's fascinating. Oh my gosh. That's so interesting. Well, you mentioned.
And it should be said that these medications, because they are medicines, should be done under clinical supervision. I do not espouse people doing recreational psychedelics.
Yeah, I agree with you.
I think they're really, very highly potent, like we've never seen. And it's something that, just to be responsible with those.
Yes. And for those listening, I have a private podcast feed. If you go to AndreaOwen.com/journey, where I'm talking about like where I'm getting it from and exactly what you talked about. So I appreciate you pausing to mention that. You talked about serotonin and dopamine. So could this also change the game for people with ADHD?
Yeah, ADHD, basically let's go to this metaphor. The habenula is like the brake pedal of your brain, of your behavior, whereas the dopamine is like the gas pedal. And so just like in a real car, you can floor the gas all you want, but if the brakes are on, then you're going to not go anywhere. But drugs of addiction, and they did a study of heroin overdose, young men who had died of heroin overdose in the UK. And they found that their habenulae, their brakes, were shrunken down. And so it's no longer able to stop the dopamine system from overriding. So what happens is this is the new thinking in addiction medicine, is that there's this balance of if I seek pleasure, let's go +1 on the number scale, then my brain is going to punish me -2. So now I'm at a -1 on the number scale, right? So that equation stays. And then if I try again, I go for another hit of my, whatever my dopamine reach is, whatever my pleasure is, right? It could be TV, it could be my phone, it could be whatever. Then I get up to 0, and then I get punished -2. So it's a losing equation each time. And what happens is that the negative part of that is the habenula driving the craving for more, because when the habenula is on, it's a state of psychic pain that we just feel really itchy and restless.
Yeah.
And so our monkey brain is like, oh, let me just eat this thing or take this drug or do this thing that I'm addicted to or that gives me pleasure, including the phones, right? The phones turn on the habenula, especially doom scrolling at night.
Yeah.
But then it's a losing game. So this is why a lot of physicians are experimenting with, dopamine fasting, for example, to reset us back to 0, because that equation is always a losing equation. And so what happens is that the habenula dominates dopamine. It dominates serotonin. But the only thing that dominates the habenula, that gets it to kind of be smaller breaks, is drugs of addiction. And literally, for those of us who have known people who have been, steeped in addiction, it is literally a state of helpless. They cannot stop themselves. They do not have brakes in their car. So increase compassion for that situation. And also, I think it'll inform more creativity around how to deal with somebody in that state, so that we can help them restore their habenula, their motivation, and really help them to get off of the craving related chase of that negative math, like getting -2 for every 1.
That's so interesting. I'm assuming it's already has and will continue to do a lot for just understanding addiction. I think for so long we've only had, what I mean is what's been mainstream is the Alcoholics Anonymous Big Book, which they got one doctor's opinion in the 1930s, I think it was, who said it was an allergy, which is very vague, and also kind of like, what? But it sounds like what he was talking about might be pointing to that.
I think that the Big Book is, again, going back to iterative mindset, it's a bunch of iterations. It's iterative thinking, it's iterative doing, try this, don't do that, like that kind of thing. And the community holds people, and the storytelling is all stories of like how I succeeded, how I did this, or how I'm not doing this, so that there is a shared body of work around iteration. Coaching also helps with iteration, because you have another person who has been there, done that, seen a lot of people, and can offer support in the form of like different ways to tweak and experiment with what you're trying and adapt it as you go. As long as the coaching can set up an initial expectation of, we're just going to figure this out, as opposed to we are going to succeed out the gate. That's a toxic pill, right?
Yeah,
which we're going to do this SMART goal. And SMART goals have been shown recently to be worse than doing nothing at all.
Kidding me?
No, I'm not kidding, because you're narrowing success down to like, here's this one thing that needs to happen perfectly, and everything else in that pie is failure. So 1% success rate and a 99% failure rate. Iteration flips the script. 99% success, 1% maybe you can come up with a clever way that you failed. Yeah. But if I set you up to iterate from Jump Street, from the beginning of the conversation, then you're going to keep going when everybody else is going to get stuck.
Mm-hmm. Interesting. Oh my gosh. Well, and the reason I asked that question is because being someone in long-term recovery, I think we talked about it on a podcast episode not too long ago. When people say, I lost my mother to addiction, and I really wish that she, they'll sometimes even say it in passing, like, I really wish she would have been strong enough to choose me instead of her addiction. And that always breaks my heart because for the person who feels that way, and also like if you could understand what it feels like to have a brain of an addict, which I still identify as one.
Yeah.
It just, and the only thing I can say to people is like, please know it didn't have anything to do with you. And
yes,
it is something so much bigger than us that we can't explain, that we wish we could change more than anything, that we wish we could trade brains and, like get our money back for the one exchange, please.
right.
And so it sounds, I'm hoping that this research on the habenula can maybe point to that. I hope.
Yeah, I think we're at the advent of something really powerful, which is, there was a time in medicine when we didn't know about bacteria. And so we used leeches and we didn't wash our hands and we had typhoid Mary and we had all these crazy things go on. But then from the point where we were like, oh, there's bacteria and they spread and they move around, then we changed everything. Public health changed, washing hands changed, antibiotics came in, human creativity was unleashed on the problem. And so we're at that moment, that watershed moment here where, we see the mother with addiction differently and we know better what to do. I had somebody who has a very serious addiction and was undergoing really serious, had tried everything and that kind of thing. He came here to my ranch and we were walking the land and he's like, no one's ever explained to me this whole failure stuff, but it completely turned around where nothing else worked. Having the correct diagnosis, having the correct view on how the brain is acting helped him to better direct his efforts, and now he's doing much better. And so that's something that I'm hoping will spread very rapidly once this information is in people's hands.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Okay. We need to take one more break. We'll be right back. Today's podcast is sponsored by MIDI Health. Ladies, are you over 40 like me and dealing with hot flashes, insomnia, brain fog, moodiness, some vaginal dryness, or weight gain? Don't just accept it as part of aging. These symptoms are often linked to hormonal changes during perimenopause and menopause. At MIDI Health, they get it. Their experts know what you're going through and how to help. MIDI clinicians are menopause specialists offering safe, effective, FDA-approved solutions. And guess what? MIDI care is covered by insurance. So stop pushing through it alone. Schedule a virtual visit and dive deep into your unique symptoms and health background. You'll walk away feeling heard and with a plan to start feeling better. Visit MIDI Health today and reclaim your well-being. You deserve to feel great. Book your virtual visit today at joinmidi.com. That's joinmidi.com. joinmidi.com. When you're listening to a song on the radio and you get the profound feeling that the song playing was written about you? Now imagine having the power to gift that same incredible feeling to someone you love with an original song from Songfinch that actually is written just for them. Songfinch lets you create an original radio quality song inspired by your own life and the people you love. It's completely unique, personal, and lasts forever. Whether your song is for Father's Day, an upcoming graduation, wedding, or anniversary, or even just a gift to show your loved one how much you care, start your song now to lock in one of Songfinch's top artists. I gifted Songfinch to myself, a song about my late father, and I'm so excited to play you a clip.
Flipping through the slides of learning how to live and how to love, and coming undone a father, daughters without, so she writes it down.
One of my clients heard about Songfinch from this podcast, and so she had a song created for her son who is graduating, and she told me that they both cried when she played it for him and that it exceeded her expectations. For a limited time, Songfinch is letting our listeners upload their song to Spotify for free, so you and the lucky person you gift it to can listen to it anywhere, anytime. Go to songfinch.com/noise and start your song. After you purchase, you'll be prompted to add Spotify streaming for your original song for free, a $50 value. Again, my URL is songfinch.com/noise. Don't forget to share your song with us too. songfinch.com/noise.
I'd like to introduce you to the Minimalist Moms podcast. It's hard enough being a mom, and the last thing you need is stress from too much stuff and an overcrowded schedule. For too long, I lived with the mindset that bigger was better, and the more I added to my life, instead of feeling better, I felt overwhelmed. It was time for a radical new mindset. Less is more. I'm not into extremes. I didn't throw everything away. My brand of minimalism is more about adding than subtracting. Get rid of the excess to make room for what you love. In other words, it's about living life with purpose. I hope you'll listen in, and my guest and myself can inspire you to think more and do with less. The Minimalist Moms podcast, available wherever you listen to podcasts.
Okay, I love that before we started recording, you said everything is performative. We need to make it iteration. You also talk about the power of reframing. So can you sort of explain to us too how common methods like tracking what foods you eat, or, which is essentially dieting and in SMART goals and things. Can you explain one more time, like why that often backfires and that it triggers the failure detection? I just want to make sure that we all totally understand, because I can't tell you how many people have told me, I buy the vegetables and they go bad, and, I'm just a failure and I'll never figure this out. So before we close, I want to make sure we totally understand that.
Yeah, that's a great question. Basically, what we live in right now is a very performative healthcare system and performative well-being industry, right?
Mm-hmm.
And with the SMART goals and goal setting and tracking against those goals being the dominant way that people think that they need to change their behavior. The problem with that, again, goes down to you have this pie, right, of 100% of things that could happen. Whenever you isolate one thing as the thing, the tracking, I've got to make 1,300 calories or I failed, then it's a failure field. Then it's a failure trigger field for the habenula. Then the habenula goes off, then it kills your motivation to keep trying. So this is why you get, let's take dieting, for example, you get a 97 to 99% relapse rate long-term, a regain of the weight, because everything was so performative and so strict and so narrow as the way it defines success, that everything else was failure, and failure eventually comes anyway because life happens,
right?
Things change. And so we have the wrong view on that. Tracking is great for awareness. If I don't know exactly how many chips I'm eating, maybe I know that, because there's a mindlessness that I'm trying to overcome. But once that information is known, then I don't need to track for the rest of my life. In our research, we find that anywhere from like 1% to 5% of any 100 people are long-term trackers. The rest of us need to stop tracking after a couple weeks because it starts to become a failure field and starts to kill our motivation to keep trying. So the number one thing that people need to maintain is their motivation, and their iteration helps them to do that.
Okay, gotcha. It reminds me of the sort of metaphor that I came up with in my mind. And if we're using the example of tracking, which 0 stars, do not recommend. It's like you hand somebody a bow and arrow who's never done archery before, and the target is a football field away, and you're like, make the target, get a bullseye. What's the likelihood that they're going to succeed? Probably not. Maybe like it's a Hail Mary shot, but probably not. That's
right. That's right. And we live in this world that's awash with very performative tools like social media, for example. It creates FOMO, it creates comparison thinking. Those are all failure types. And so that helps to kill people's motivation to keep going, drives depression, drives anxiety, all those things. So we're caught up in this performative world, performing for others, whether it's likes and followers or whatever the case may be, like, hey, look at me. It's fine that people follow people they love and that they really find valuable. But that performative aspect of it is what is causing everybody to trigger their habenula, and lose motivation to live their life.
Got it. Okay. Before we close, and I'm going to tell everybody definitely to buy this book because I'm so excited for this research in your book. Is there anything you want to circle back to make sure that you mention or underscore before we close?
Yeah, I think most people don't know what iteration is. And so iteration in the book, I have a chapter on it. It just kind of categorizes, here's all the different ways that you can iterate because it's not in the common knowledge right now. So iteration is like tweaking, tinkering, adjusting, making small changes to things, completely changing direction, all that kind of stuff. And that is the solution. I just want to just highlight, asterisk, spotlight that because that is the takeaway here, which is that if you iterate, iterators never fail. And then if you never fail, you never trigger your habenula. So I think that's the watershed that I'm hoping that people get.
Thank you for that. When you said it, I assumed that it meant like just different ways or scenarios of doing things, like exactly like trying different ways and figuring out the one that works for you, which I've just figured that out because I'm in my late 40s, but I hope people don't have to wait that long. Just in case anybody missed it in the beginning, the book is Unstoppable Brain, the new neuroscience that frees us from failure, eases our stress, and creates lasting change. That link will be in the show notes. Is there a special place that you have that you want people to go to learn more about your work?
Yeah, you can go to drkyrabobinet.com and we have an iterative mindset score there that you can kind of test your iterative mindset. And then, that'll make a lot more sense in terms of, looking at the book, and there will be other resources and events that I host there because there's a lot of people who are very, very interested in this topic.
Thank you so much for this work. And we love a good quiz. Absolutely, positively. And everyone, thank you so much for being here. Your time is valuable. And I appreciate so much that you spend it with me and my guests. And remember, it's our life's journey to make ourselves better humans and our life's responsibility to make the world a better place. Bye for now. Hey everyone, thanks again for listening. I would be so incredibly grateful if you haven't done so already, if you could leave a review of this podcast on Apple Podcasts. Super easy if you already listen to your shows over there. But if you don't, or maybe you have the app on your phone, but you listen to the show on a different app, if you could leave a review for this show, it matters so much. I wish I could express how much it matters. I also wish that it didn't matter so much, but alas, it does. So if you haven't already, please go review and rate the show. It would mean so much to me. And thank you so much. I hope you have an amazing day.
Hey there, I'm Debbie Reber, the founder of Tilt Parenting and the author of the book Differently Wired. The mission of Tilt is to change the way neurodivergence, whether that's having a learning disability, having ADHD, being gifted, autistic, or some combination of all of the above, is perceived and experienced so differently wired kids and the parents like us raising them can truly thrive. On the Tilt Parenting podcast, I get to talk with authors, therapists, educators, and parenting experts who are committed to this mission. I ask the questions my listeners are most curious about when it comes to supporting our kids. And in turn, my guests share strategies for challenges, out-of-the-box ideas for navigating school, best practices for therapies, tips for advocating, and so many thoughtful insights on what it really takes to help our kids grow up feeling seen and respected so they can create awesome lives for themselves. I know that raising a differently wired kid can feel overwhelming and isolating, but I promise you, you are not alone, and it can feel so much better. If you're on this parenting journey, come listen to Tilt Parenting. Together, we can shift this paradigm and show up for our exceptional kids with hope, possibility, and joy.